There's so many things that happen in the software engineering team that can absorb the team into internal considerations. Right? But let's remember, what matters the most is what you actually do with that tech for a business reason, right?
Their only job is to bring information into the engineering teams, and engineers themselves decide what to build, why to build it, because of the information that product managers bring to the team.
Oh my God, Dios mío, this is, oh my God, Dios mío.
Welcome back to Hotfix. Our guest today is Alex Oprescu. Alex is not a PM, but an engineering manager. Both Stefan and I already worked together at Verity, one of our previous career stops. From our own experience, we can confidently say that Alex is one of the most commercially thinking engineering managers we know. We both experienced his approach to building teams, which was very inspiring. Alex worked at multiple scale-ups and startups, such as Product Board, and is now an engineering manager at They.Do. In today's episode, we will talk about how to build high-performing teams and what role PMs play in that. We also talked about why building good teams is like training a pro sports team and when to avoid big tech rewrites. Spoiler, almost always. Welcome to the show, Alex.
Welcome, Alex.
Thank you for having me.
Alex, on top of your LinkedIn profile, one can read that you say software engineering should be a team sport. Can you tell us more about that and what's behind that?
Yes, I have these two facts in mind. One that is software engineering and software in general is not written by one person only. I mean, there are very few projects out there that are just one contributor. It's a collaborative, creative process that involves teams, a lot of times teams of teams and so on, right? So there are quite a lot of people involved. And the other fact is that creative collaboration is hard. Our public interface as humans, which is language, is quite loose and leaves a lot of interpretation on the table. A lot of thought is actually lost in our communication. It takes quite some time for us to actually align on things and move things forward. I usually use this team sport parallel to emphasize these two facts. It's like you can play a team sport like a team of 7-year-olds and everyone is going after the ball. Nobody is holding their position and it's chaos all over the place, right? Or you can play it as a pro team. And if you, for example, football, players trust and respect each other and they keep their position. And at any moment in time, there are 5-6 players that actually play and the rest are actually preparing for the next move and so on. And when they practice, they perfect both their craft as players, like how they move with the ball, all the skills, but also their collaboration. So they practice together, they practice their game together, and they value both of these skill sets kind of the same. So I think this is very much applicable to software teams as well. A lot of them are just playing like 7-year-olds, unfortunately. First, that teamwork is based on that common goal that we all have. We aim for aligned autonomy backed by craft, respect, trust, communication, skills, play, win, and lose together. I think this is also key, and a lot of software teams respect that. There is no blame, there is learning. And also that always the team interest prevails individual interest. This is like in sport, you can have a superstar that plays for themselves. It will not help the team at all. It's more useful to have players that actually play for the team and have a good team spirit and so on than having selfish superstars. Yeah, I hope I encapsulated all of this. There is a lot to unpack underneath. There are also a lot of people that actually challenge this parallel to team sports for various reasons. Yes, team sports are to some extent a finite game. You have rules. The game starts, ends. You have a clear winner. You have a clear loser. You know how to score and so on. This is not the case for software engineering teams, but still there are so many learnings that can be taken from how team sport is being practiced at the pro level.
And do you believe that this is the case only if you have a team of equally skilled players in a team sport or software engineers. Because what I'm thinking, right, is that a team playing in the 7th league of football, they would tremendously benefit from a superstar being more individualistic, trying to up the game. So do you believe that this only works if you have a team of equally skilled players or software engineers for that fact?
No, I think it's also in sports. You need all of these different skill sets or level of skill sets, different personalities, different profiles. If I'm not wrong, Kim Scott has this definition in Radical Candor of a rock star and a superstar. You need both. There was this great Real Madrid team with Zinedine Zidane and Ronaldo and so on. There was one key player that got so little press and was noticed so little, but was key to actually that team working. His name was Makelele. He was a defense midfield player. His job was to make the connection between defense and offense and bring the ball, not in a very skilled way, not through dribbling or whatever, but bring the ball from defense to offense. Once he left the team, that team kind of crumbled because it was all about superstars. So I'm not saying you don't need superstars. I'm saying you need at least a Makelele. And you need everyone to hold their position. You cannot have your attacker putting their gloves on and play goalkeeper. They need to respect. And even if the goalkeeper is not the best in the world, they need to respect their craft and let them act in their field so that the attacker actually plays attack and scores goals and scores more than the opposition and so on, right? So I think this is the key. But again, like in sports, you need a good combination of all types of players.
Yeah, I love that analogy. Most of our listeners are product managers, and I would like to talk a bit about from your experience, the optimal relationship or the optimal collaboration between product managers and engineers. And you already had quite a career so far. You worked in many different companies. You've seen many different software teams. When you look at the teams that worked the best, what role did the product manager play, and what did they do well in these setups?
I think there are a few things. What I've seen help a lot product engineering team is the product manager actually owning and bringing that outside in perspective. Right? There's so many things that happen in the software engineering team that can absorb the team into internal considerations, like which tech do we choose? How do we put these things together and so on? But let's remember, what matters the most is what you actually do with that tech for a business reason, right? That you solve a problem of a customer and they are willing to pay for it. And this outside-in perspective is really important. Without it, you make maybe good local decisions, but very bad in the grand scheme of things, right? A grip on when and how to bring that outside-in perspective and infuse the team with the right customer insight, with the right market analysis, with the right positioning, with the right priorities, and so on. Not in a dictatorship-like, but in a collaborative way, right? So, hey, this is what I bring, and what can we do with it? How can we mold it so that we create the best solutions? I think this is the top one that I would put. There is a lot underneath, and we can unpack that. But
yeah, that's great. Also, Stefan and I were recently at a conversation how customer centricity is a default and is pretty much baked in early companies, but is harder and harder to maintain as the company grows. And I think it's one of the product managers' jobs to actively infuse that customer centricity in their daily interactions with engineers.
I have
definitely
one question to you, Alex. So I recently read the product engineering handbook of Postdoc. So Postdoc, they're having this publicly available, and they drive what you describe to an extreme. At that company, the product manager's job is not to set the roadmap. Product managers do not decide what to build. Product managers do not go into conversations with C-level about the goals that are about to be reached. Their only job is to bring information into the engineering teams, and engineers themselves decide what to build, why to build it, because of the information that product managers bring into the team. Do you believe something like that works? Because to me, when I read it first, it sounded extreme, right? And then many times I look back at the companies that I worked at, I wouldn't have been sure if it worked. I do believe that these kind of extreme approaches can work really well. And I think it plays right into what you're saying. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I think, as always, the answer of an engineer will be depends, right? So, no, but I mean, yes, it can work if we play the game as a pro team. If we play it as a 7 years old team, it will not, right? I think it also assumes a lot of the skill set that you need to have in that engineering team, the driving seat when it comes to the roadmap and so on. Yeah. And I think in the industry right now, there's a big hype around this product engineering and what it means. So you expect engineers to not only be a craftsman of their engineering hard skills and the engineering domain, but also to be a product savvy person and understand where the product is, where the customers benefit out of the product, what is the problem, and kind of connect these things on their own as well. And I think this way of working works only if you have that, right? So it's not only on the product manager, by the way, to play one game or the other, or to interpret their role in a way or the other, right? You have one product, usually in a product engineering team, you have one product manager and a couple of engineers. So the balance of power is more on the engineering side. So if you expect the team to actually be performant, there are definitely more expectations on the engineering side than there are on the product management side. So I think it can work. It also depends on the type of product that you have. If you have a highly technical product where technical complexity is inherently linked to your customer base because they are more technical, then yes, I think you would also benefit out of putting engineering in the driving seat when it comes to the roadmap and so on. But that assumes that there is a very good streamlined communication from the product management side and bringing that outside in perspective. Because sometimes it's just fuzzy, right? I think from our time at Verity, you had one thing, Stefan, that stayed with me. It's like when you say our goal is to make revenue, then the team can choose to sell oil instead of building software. Because why not? If the goal is there, then let's do that because maybe it pays off. So I think the communication needs to be very crisp and to not leave room for such broad interpretations. Then left hand will not know what the right hand is doing, and then they will pull at different ends of the rope and not work, right? And who falls? Yeah, who will get responsible for this? Most probably the, lead engineer and the product manager, because it's easy to put accountability there.
I also believe that it puts the burden of understanding of the customer on the engineer, right? And I think for a company like Postdoc, as I mentioned, it's simple for them to do it because their customers are engineering teams. And the chance that an engineer understands the problem of an engineering team, I would say quite high. If you're building for insurances or banks, or if you're building for designers, it might be a lot harder to develop this deep understanding, right? And I guess that's where the product manager has to come in and actually spend their time to develop this extremely deep understanding of not just the problem space, but also the desires, the challenges the customer in the end has, right? It's very dependent as well on which problem are you solving.
Exactly. There is a trap, though. I mean, I don't know how Postdoc does it, but when you can identify one-to-one with your target audience or with your ICP and so on, you can bias all your decisions through your experiences, right? Which are not the sum of all experiences out there, also not the average of all the experiences out there. So I think it still requires engineers that are in such a setup to actually have self-awareness and say, yes, I can easily make a lot of assumptions based on my own experience, but I still need to hear a lot of other experiences and perspectives out there. right?
Yeah, and I think what is interesting
yeah.
is like how they solve it, or at least how I read it, right? Is that what they do is they force engineers to do 1 week of first level support every month. So 1 week of every month they have to do support. They have to join customer calls. So they have to do all these things to experience this pain firsthand. And what I was thinking then is that, is this something that most engineers I've worked with would like to do? So many times engineers I've worked with wouldn't have wanted to join customer calls or spend time on anything but building software, right? So it's quite interesting, right? But I think this ties back to what you're saying is this product engineer. I think it is changing to that in many companies, because also coding is just becoming more and more understanding how product works and less actually typing letters onto your keyboard, because there's just so many tools like, I don't know, Cursor, etc., that help you create code. And actually the job shifts more and more towards understanding the problem and solving it.
Yeah. In all honesty, I think the job was always product engineering when it comes to software engineering that is done for creating something that you sell. I think we all benefit out of what academics are doing, because if you also look at the big inventions like iPhone and so on, they're just based on a lot of university grants done in different experiments and so on. So I think that's the place where technical aspect matters 99%. And the rest, it was always the case that it was product engineering that mattered. I think it was a little bit harder indeed for a long time because the engineering was too low level, right? And now with all of these additional layers on top of it, it becomes easier, right, to create something. So as you said, all the programming languages are abstraction of assembly code and so on. There are abstractions on top of abstractions, and the latest ones with AI, which is natural language, which is, again, an easier to comprehend abstraction. But it was always the game, right? I don't believe that in the Apple of the world or Microsoft of the world, they were mistaken that they were doing pure technology. No, they were doing technology that needed to be marketed, that needed to actually solve real problems, that had user experience concerns, and all of that, right?
David, I think we could talk for hours on the underlying or general purpose of what the product manager should do, especially as I think this is now changing or maybe shifting. But let's get to the heart of our podcast today, which is our failure story. You told us before that you once worked on a big technical rewrite together with the product team, which has failed. Yeah, let's call it spectacularly. So can you explain us what happened there?
Yeah, maybe before I do that, I can hijack for 5 minutes, because I think there is a little bit of context before we get into the rewrite of things, right? So by now, I've worked in a couple of B2B SaaS companies, right? And the B2B SaaS model is specific, and it comes with specific product and engineering challenges. And in this context, we can talk about a failure of a rewrite. I think the main characteristic of the B2B SaaS is that it's a constant race to more features. So this is a tension that happens in any company that wants to sell software as a service to other companies, right? In the business terms, I think there are two motions that need to be respected kind of equally, because otherwise the SaaS model just flops. You have recurring revenue, so you sell to more customers, you acquire more customers, and you retain them, because basically you sell it as a service on a monthly, yearly basis. So if they churn, you lost business. And if you somehow churn more than you are able to acquire, then it's a failed business, right? You cannot make more money or even sustain it. And I think both of these motions actually decide product market fit, right? So you're able to sell to acquire more customers. The easier it is, the better it is. The more accelerated it is, the better it is. You're able to retain them, because if they leave after a month, then you're back in the square zero, right? Cool. So I think this is fundamental to understand, because this shapes the playground a little bit. So first, you are reselling the same product to the same customers every month. This shapes the narrative that it's always more, never less. Why would I buy next month the same thing for the same money Or why would I buy less of it for the same money? So it's like, give me more features, right? The other part is that B2B aspect means that the economic buyer usually is different than the end user of the product, right? So the VP in certain company decides which product they would buy for their team, right? Yes, they take in recommendations, and we know that tools that are appealing to the end user, and this is how they get sold in large companies as well. But let's recognize that it's hard to relate in a lot of circumstances for the economic buyer to relate to the quality of the product that they buy for the end user. They're different people, basically, right? So then if you don't intentionally sell quality, they will buy quantity. So it's another race rat towards more features, right? This is what we call feature factory, or all of these terms that we have, I think, half jokes or they have a pejorative sense to them, but they describe the same challenge that we're faced with, right? More and more features because of how this game is being played. So I think the winning teams are getting better and better at taming this, right? And basically knowing exactly what they're selling and why this quality of what they're selling is better than quantity. Losing teams usually just fall into that more and more paradigm, right? I think a big, and now we can relate to the story, but a lot of times we confuse the sum of n features that are feature to customer segment fit. We confuse the sum of this with PMF, with product market fit. So it's like we have adoption of a product, but actually each customer kind of buys it for a different feature, right? It's like in sum, it looks like we have 100 customers, but when you segment it, actually you have 2 per feature or something like that, right? It's the worst scenario to be in because out of a sudden, none of them are, so they kind of buy the feature set. I will take all of this additional stuff because I'm mostly interested in this specific feature, right? That solves my specific problem. And I think this is why advice to early stage startup is make sense or keep a very tight grip on your ICP. Have it very narrow so that you don't let this selling to so many customer segments, because this will generate complexity. You will have an overloaded product that you think has great adoption, but it actually is segmented in multiple features that have average adoption. This complexity your engineering team will need to deal with. And every feature that you add has exponential complexity added. So it gets harder and harder to evolve the product. And that means slowing down, while the game that you play is always more features. So your CEO
Alex,
will ultimately come to you and say, hey, what's happening here? We're not delivering fast enough.
By the way, I also think that this race to more and more features is also caused by VC money. I think that very often VCs are investing into startups. They put them on a very ambitious growth trajectory, and then they want to hear a plan from the founders on how they're going to achieve that. Very often the response to that is we're opening up new markets by this and that feature. I think you can also see that by at companies which are bootstrapped, which do not rely on VC money, that they focus very often much more and are much better at optimizing what they have compared to building more things.
Yes.
I completely agree with everything that you said. I just wanted to also add this as a reason of why that could be the case.
I think it's true, but I think it's a combination, right? So yes, that's a pressure point, right? You want, as a VC, you want the explosive growth, and then you push for that, right? And you look at the financials, because let's be honest, hardly the investors understand deeply what product they are actually investing into, right? It's either driven by a hype in the market, or you slap AI nowadays on it and it kind of attracts the interest. But it's not 100% that the fault is with the investor, because they are a financial investor. If you want to reduce it in simple terms, the fault is still with the professionals that take the money in to grow a product that they should know inside out, and they still make the mistakes of not understanding who they are selling it to and why their customers are buying it, and letting that complexity of too many customer profiles buying their product early on, they get that complexity leaked into their product. And they treat this as product market fit. And of course, then they get maybe they realize it at some point, but because of the VC loop of we need to raise the next round, then they get into this vicious loop. I agree with you. So at some point, I guess most of the founders would get this learning and hopefully do their next startup better after they failed the first one. But yes, it can get into that. But the fault, it's still with the professionals that should know their product inside out, right? Especially at early stage, and their customers inside out, especially at early stage. So
Great.
I think for us now, looking at the failure, it was exactly this setup, right? So having on the table a product that was complex because N features with feature to different customer segment fit, right? Taking it as a sum, we treated it as, it actually has a lot of traction, right? Add to that 2, 3, 4 big customers coming in. So by the way, big customers are a different ICP. They have different requirements. So we let that leak in, like global, multinational companies with a lot of data, with a lot of users that bring to your product. And out of a sudden, the problem becomes scaling. Like we have this one customer that has all of this data and our product doesn't hold it anymore. And it's terribly slow and whatever, right? And now we have the product complexity, so all the business logic, and we have the tough requirements of running it at scale. And out of a sudden, the company, the product managers, the business is held hostage by engineering team saying, we need a rewrite because you want performance, high performance for a clumsy set of features that have been patched together over time and accumulated a lot of technical depth and so on, because they were actually MVPs leaked into production. Each one of them kind of having an average adoption and stayed there forever because it's so hard to retire once 2, 3 customers jumped on it, right? And they pay for it. So you have these two tensions, and then basically your engineering team holds you hostage because they cannot move fast anymore. They have all of this complexity. You want them to move fast because your play is actually more features. Remember that? It's like you either create more features or you lose market, another competitor comes, and so on. Because what you sell is quantity, not quality, right? What's the solution that at some point someone like myself, like an engineering manager, would put in front of the business? Like, we need to rewrite, right? It's like, only if we had all of this great architecture that we saw at the latest conference, only if we had this, so much better it would be. So many more customers would buy what we see that one unlucky customer that we somehow onboarded to our product at a large scale is requesting for, right? It's like, and these are, sorry, my French, a shit amount of assumptions that 99% of the cases do not hold in real world. Actually, that one customer bought your solution because maybe someone had a relationship in the company and the economic buyer got a kickback from you on the big contract, and they said, yeah, okay, let's buy this for 1 year, sold it internally as a pilot, and so on and so forth. And then you believe that you found gold, right? And then you play on that and you say, let's do the rewrite because now we can scale this to 100 customers, right? But it's a little bit fake, right? It's because it's not based on actual traction. It's not like customers are knocking your door down saying, sell this thing to me, and then saying you have a scaling problem because now we have 100 customers that are asking for the same thing, right? And the fault by the way, is split, but the root cause starts in lying to yourself that you have product market fit, when actually what you have is N features with to N different customer segment fit, right? And then you go into this rewrite, you lose momentum, you lose time, and this is what we've done, right? We went into it, then we added internal constraints, like we have N engineers of specific technology. So basically we choose the rewrite to be done in a specific technology, even though we know that this will not make it better in any way. It's just changing apples for oranges. I think it's kind of this, or we believe that the architecture is the fault of this not scaling, and let's choose this other new architecture, and basically you change a set of problems for a different set of problems that you don't even know what they are, but at the same time promise so much faster, so much better product in a certain timeline, because this is how you sell a rewrite internally. Or when you go into the rewrite, you ask the right questions of which features we actually want to take, because now we have this chance of actually recreating this product. Which features do we want to take in? It starts usually by, yes, we will just take the core, and very fast it goes to, we need all the features, because customer X and customer Y are using that, and all makes sense, right? And then, of course, you go the rewrite. Hopefully you go through it, because a lot of teams, I assume, just flop while being in the midst of it, because it's quite complex. But let's say you get it somehow out of the door, and surprise, surprise, nobody wants to buy it, right? Because one, the world has moved while you invested money in that rewrite, and two, they didn't really want to buy it before either, right? So it's like they liked one feature, but your competitors for sure evolved faster into that, or a niche player appeared. The linear versus zero type of things in the world.
Then let me ask a question, because I think that this is probably universal to most software companies that are more than 6-7 years old. I think most software companies acquire a set of features, many never used, many being like MVPs leaked into production. And then at one point, everything comes to a halt and engineering teams say, we need to rewrite this to make this happen again. And I think even the most innovative companies 10 years ago are probably in this situation right now. And I think this is a problem that is very rarely avoided throughout the entire, lifetime of a company, especially software companies. So being in that situation, what should be the thing that this team should be doing to not lose out, right? Because I think Atlassian, Jira, I think they have dominated the market for 15 years. And I think now there are so many others that came up that are just so much leaner. They don't have a legacy code base. They don't have a problem of still on-prem customers that have their on-prem solution. And then they have a cloud and an on-prem solution. And Jira has now 17 different hybrid solutions between their on-prem customers, cloud customers, some features there, a mobile app. It's just all these things that make it so hard to maintain. I believe that they have quite smart product engineering teams. I believe they did everything in their best interest. So how can you, first of all, avoid getting to this situation? But then second of all, if you find yourself in this situation as a software team, what should you do?
These are, it's a hard question to answer, because if you had the answer to this, it's the $1 million question or multi-million-dollar question and answer, right? I think so. The first thing is to actually have a good sense of the business, right? So remember, I think this is quite important to remember, that doing a rewrite on an average product would not make that product more sellable, right? It's as simple as that, right? So it's a local maximum that you can achieve is how much traction your product has. I think it comes to the craft of product management and engineering and product engineering together when developing the product from day one to, forever, if you put it like this. So I think I recently stumbled upon this rather simple model from Kent Beck. he calls it 3X: explore, expand, extract. Right? He developed it when he was at Facebook. I think it's quite old, teen, it might be, or something like that. But he puts in very simple terms that when you have a product that you sell, right, a software product, when you develop it, you go through at least these 3 stages. Exploration is like you try to see what sticks to the wall. You have multiple experiments. The game is experimentation, right? So as many experiments you can run, isolated from each other, and that you can learn from, the game is to learn, the better off you will consume the money that you have to finally find that what is the rocket that will take you to the moon, right? So that's why early startups fail. They consume the money faster than they find the rocket that will take them to the moon. But let's say you're in the lucky group of actually one of those experiments paying out, right? And booming. Then you go into the expand phase. So in the expand phase, the game is to solve bottlenecks, right? So it's like, what are the blockers to adoption, to even more traction? How can I make this rocket actually go to the moon, right? It's like, I eliminate friction, and so on, right? And you take this one by one, and it's all hands on deck, right? Because if you really found gold, then customers will really knock your door down, right? And say, give me this, I want it, right? And then your problem is, how can you scale it to more and more customers? What is preventing you to actually give them this service? You're failing because you're not putting your best talent to solve the bottlenecks, right? If you don't give it to them, they will go to someone that will. If you play expansion when you're in exploration, you will eliminate blockers on something that actually doesn't see traction. You will starve yourself from running other experiments that could pay off, right? So you will run out of money chasing the wrong thing, basically. And then the last one, where are all of these companies that we like to mention that are successful get to, it's extraction. Extraction means that I found gold and I exploit it. So now it's about profits, it's about making money, it's about scaling this to millions or whatever, millions of customers, right? The more I sell the same product to, the better, right? And this is where Atlassian is. They have a market. They know that their product sells almost by itself, and it got sold for a long time without competition, almost by itself, right? So then they can play a very predictable game. And this is where you should do rewrites, right? If you do rewrites in exploration, if you do rewrites in expansion, you're losing the game, right? So you do rewrites in extraction, because this is basically the money is flowing. You're optimizing for costs because profitability. You want to pay less on infrastructure, things to be more optimized, your sales process to be better, your customer support to be better, and so on, right? So you spend time there, and that's when you can rewrite your systems. And I think this is where a lot of startups make the mistake. They don't identify correctly the phase that they are in, and they do such investments in rewrites in a phase that is not extraction. And of course, it's not absolute, but at least you need to identify where you are. And the transitions between these 3 phases are very hard to manage, right? Or to identify, when am I actually going out of exploration? The last thing that I want to say is that once you get into extraction, you can also invest a lot more in exploration. And this is what Atlassian has done, right? So they have this Project A, I think they call it. Like, they branched out Jira in different other projects. Does it work for finance? Does it work for marketing? Branch out the code and do this product for that specific ICP and see if it flies. If it doesn't, we kill it, right? If it does, we invest more into it. So they still do a lot of exploration. They don't just sit back and say, hey, we are extracting out of what we invented and so on. But they are in a much better position to do this. And under the hood, they can optimize and rewrite Jira as many times as you want. Yes, it's not that simple. It's a system that is a grand scale. It needs a lot of minds to actually know how to rewrite all of these things and so on. Now, imagine if they would have done that in their first years, they wouldn't be here at all, right? Because they consumed all their budget on rewriting Jira. It's the same with Facebook. They still have some PHP around from their early stage. They haven't invented React in their first years when they were on the, fighting with other social media networks that were also on the horizon there, right? They invented React a little bit later, right? And during expansion and eliminated blockers and so on. At some point, they were also fucking slow, right? The page load was terrible and so on and so forth, right? They fixed those. But at that point, customers were like signing up like crazy for Facebook. So they were knocking their door down and saying, give me this service, right? So they were sure that this is the rocket that they will reach the moon with. And this is, also the mistake that we've done, if you remember, was the same, like believing that the product that we had at hand was actually in extraction. Like we have above 100 customers. What do we do about it? We rewrite. Yeah, perfect. It was not the case. So we mistakenly identified ourselves to be at the stage that we were not and played the wrong game. And it kind of starts off there. So I think my humble advice, but it's not easy, it's a lot of craft, to product managers and engineers in general, to at least know where the product that they're working on is. Is it exploration? Is it expansion? Is it extraction? They're totally different games to play, different skill set. Someone might like exploration, might not like extraction on both sides, product management or engineering. Don't be there. Go somewhere else where you know the game that you're playing and you know how to play it and you enjoy it, but also everyone around you kind of is aware. With that product, we tried to do strategy canvas, right? So that we start from the beginning and we say, what is our ICP? What is our unfair advantage over other competitors? What's our weakness? What our competitors have over us, right? So we were trying to grab this problem and understand exactly where we were, right? But then, of course, other forces came in. We were also maybe not 100% convinced that that was the thing to do. And then we fell a little bit into the mistake of taking internal considerations over external considerations and said, yeah, but we have these engineers that know this technology, so let's make it work with them. We have these customers that looks like they are using it, so let's play to that. And we kind of forgot about our strategy canvas. And I would actually argument that that was the thing that we should have invested a lot of energy in. Like, do we know our business inside out? Do we know who our ICP is? Do we know what we should keep in the product? What works, what doesn't? Do we know what problems we are solving? What alternatives are there? What's our advantage? And so on. And with that, communicate that to the team and kind of let them decide what to do about it from an engineering perspective. Maybe the technology that we had was good enough because if we have cut half of the features that were anyway not really useful in the grand scheme of things, then the complexity would have lowered and maybe the technology was just good enough for us to take it from there. All of these thoughts, right? So, but I think it really boils down to the craft and knowing what game you play and being good at the game. You like exploration, go to companies that do exploration, right? That are at that phase. You can assess that from outside actually and go there and be intentional. And I would give this advice both to product managers, actually to product managers, to product designers, to engineers, also to other functions, right? They're totally different systems at play and you cannot be good at all of them, by the way, at the same time. Choose your battle.
One thing that came to my mind now is going through those different phases. Could it be that there is a time clock ticking until you have to reach the next phase, or it becomes really hard to stay in that phase? And what I mean with that is that for a scale up, for example, if they are exploring for 4 years, 5 years, and they never get to that point of extraction, and They shouldn't be at that point yet, but they struggle with changing technology. They struggle with build-up of tech debt. And there's an analogy for me, for example, in the construction industry, building buildings. Usually, construction companies opt to tear down a building they buy and build a new building instead of actually renovating and building on top of what is already there. Even though you don't need as much material, you don't need as much labor, it is still cheaper to demolish the building, get rid of all the waste, and build a new building, which is crazy. But this is the time frame of like 50 years. But software is much more short-lived. Innovation happens much faster. So is there a 5-year time frame that if you don't make it out of exploration within those 5 years, you will have to tear this down and rebuild it at one point, or you will fail. You will just accrue too much tech debt. You will accrue too much complexity, and you can never be successful in expanding this product or extracting from it because it took you too long to actually be successful with it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the ultimate limit is the budget that you have, right? This is giving you the real life constraint. I think no matter how you put it, I think it's better to recognize the failure than to prolong it, like being in the wrong relationship for too long. It will not help anyone, right? I'm not saying that you should throw the gloves and give up, right? But it also comes to how you run that exploration. So just playing it out a bit. If you really consider each experiment as being a little bit isolated, and you have good governance of taking experiments, which are beta features, let's call it like that, to general availability, only when they are actually strong signals of adoption. If you have this governance and this craft emphasized in your team, then you're basically constructing and reconstructing the building multiple times, right? You're saying, okay, this experiment is a building. We built it. Before I actually let people move in, I recognize this is not the thing to do. And then what do? I tear it down instead of building on top of it, because that will not solve the problem. I think this is where most of the teams that I've also been part of and mistake that I've done is to not recognize when an experiment needs to be killed. To be honest, it's so hard to kill features in such environments that do not recognize that the experimentation is the game and each experiment is isolated and needs to be killed rather than taking to GA when it's just average adoption. And
I
that's
even
where
believe once it hit general availability, and I think there's companies that have this in their DNA, like Google, for example. I don't know how many meeting solutions I've used produced by Google and marketed by Google before Google Meet. There were like Hangouts and Hangouts for Teams, 7 different things. And they didn't rewrite the product. They actually built new products again and again until they found something that worked. And now I believe Google Meet is one of the widely used meeting solutions on the planet, right? Hangouts was never Hangouts for Teams. I don't know. I didn't even know it existed before I knew now, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago. And I think there were like 3 other ones that were actually launched to the public, generally available. There were people signed up, yet they took the money to build something new again because they were like, this is not it. We are not reaching the type of satisfaction we need. And I think this is another way to approach this, to not rewrite it, but just start at square zero, have the other product still going. It's fine. Customers can use it. And once you have a new product that you can launch to market, bring the customers over. And I think this is something that many customers or many companies could try, other than just building on top of what they have already or trying to rewrite what they have.
Love it.
Exactly.
Great. Thank you all for listening. Thank you, Alex, for taking the time today and sharing your wisdom with us. Peace. See you soon.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me. Ciao, guys. Ciao.